I would like to introduce Sara Meyers, who is a partner at Anea Scanlon and Siriano LLP in White Plains and Somers. They specialize in fields of elder law and trusts, estates, protecting rights of seniors and disabled and their families. And Sarah's going to be talking about protecting your assets and your identity, and she can explain it better than I can. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Sara.
Thank you, Valerie, Alexis, Z, Yonkers Newark, Yonkers Library System, WJCS, for having me. I think we're actually coming up on our 5-year anniversary of us doing these programs. So thank you for having me back again. Today, we're going to be talking about protecting assets, really from the cost of long-term care, a little bit of estate planning. And as we talked prior of our sessions, really talking about identity theft, scams against seniors, and how to protect your assets and your identity from those scammers. So I'm just going to share my screen. Feel free to ask questions along the way. I'm happy to answer them, as we said before, as long as they're on point to what we are talking about. I have a hard time seeing the questions in the chat as I'm speaking. So again, if it's relevant, just please feel free to ask as we go forward. And reason why we've added more about scams in our presentations about estate planning and protecting assets from the cost of long-term care is we've noticed over the past 3, 4, 5 years, the number of scams perpetuated against seniors, not in addition to the general population, and seniors with some diminished capacity, because seniors with diminished capacity, even seniors in general are a much more vulnerable community when it comes to scams. So I like talking about scams because I think a lot of it then becomes muscle memory on what to say, what not to say, what to do, what not to do. And like, oh, I heard that before. What am I talking about? Like, maybe this is something that I remember hearing about. This is sort of something that I should, pay more attention to. So what are some of the steps I can take today to start protecting assets in terms of the cost of long-term care, in terms of having funds for the next generation, and in terms of scams and identity theft? So review your estate plan. I meet with clients all the time, potential clients, they're in their 80s, they've never done their estate planning, or they did their estate planning 60 years ago or 40 years ago, when their kids were little. So it's really important to make sure you've done your estate planning, have a healthcare proxy, have a power of attorney. Do we want to avoid probate? Do we want to add someone onto my bank account to help me with banking using a power of attorney? Do I want to avoid probate? Start having those conversations about this part of life and aging successfully in terms of making sure we've taken control of our planning and of our assets. So what are some of the considerations in terms of estate planning? And many of you who've been joining us over the past 5 years know a lot of this already, so I like it as the refresher. Having a healthcare proxy. Who are you designating to make medical decisions for you if you're unable to do so? A living will. What are your end-of-life wishes in terms of having CPR, being on a ventilator, being tube fed? Giving someone access through a HIPAA form, access to your medical records. Having a power of attorney, appointing someone to make financial decisions for you if you're unable to do so. Having a will, designating who's going to inherit your funds or the beneficiaries upon your passing. Do you want to do some Medicaid planning or planning to avoid probate? Having a revocable trust and assets passing through a trust upon your passing, and in your lifetime managing them through a trust, or doing Medicaid planning to start protecting assets from the cost of long-term care and doing a Medicaid asset protection trust. So a healthcare proxy. If I'm unable to make medical decisions for myself, I want to be able to appoint someone to make those medical decisions for me. And frankly, everybody over the age of 18 should have a healthcare proxy. Just because I'm a spouse, a parent, or a child does not mean, and I fit into all 3 of those criteria right now, I have legal authority to make medical decisions for my husband, my father, or my children if they're over the age of 18, without a healthcare proxy, without a document stating that those individuals, my dad, my spouse, my husband, my daughters can, appointing me to make medical decisions for them if there should come a time where they're unable to do so. So it's important to have a healthcare proxy because you want to be in control of designating that person to make medical decisions for you if you're unable to do so. There is something in New York State called the Family Healthcare Decision Making Act, where if a person is in a facility, is in a hospital, and there is no healthcare proxy, the medical personnel can look to the closest relative to make those decisions for you. But again, I like to take control. I like to be the one saying who I want to make those decisions for me if I'm unable to do so. So I have a healthcare proxy as well because I want my spouse to make those decisions for me if I'm unable to do so. I want to be the one to have that control as to who I'm going to designate. And a question comes up all the time. I'll say, hey, Sarah, I have 3 kids. I want them all to make those medical decisions for me. Pursuant to the public health law, which is where the healthcare proxy statute or legislation is found, you can only have one agent at a time. You can't have co-agents. Why? Because the doctors want to look to one person. The medical staff wants to look to one person to make those medical decisions. And they don't want 2 people fighting as to what those decisions should be. So you have to designate one individual at a time as the healthcare proxy. So you can have a primary agent and then an alternate agent if that primary agent is unable to act. And then hand in hand with a healthcare proxy is a HIPAA form. This form, you can designate an individual or individuals to be able to access your medical records. Or for example, right, one of my daughters is overseas, needs her medical record sent from a doctor here to a doctor where she is. What can I do with the HIPAA form? She's given me authority to be able to access her medical records so I can get them from point A to point B to be able to deal with transmitting those medical records. So the healthcare proxy and the HIPAA really work hand in hand. The HIPAA, you can make the medical decisions. The HIPAA form, you're able to access those medical records. And then a living will. A living will is a document that says, God forbid, I add the God forbid part, I'm in a vegetative or comatose state with no chance of recovery, what my end of life wishes are. Do I want artificial respiration, CPR, to be on a ventilator? Why do I like that? It's important to note, in New York State, there's actually no living will statute. There's no guidance as to a living will. The living will is used as guidance to the healthcare proxy and evidence to your doctors as to what those end of life wishes are. And I like it for another reason as well, because I've taken control. I have a living will. I've signed it because I don't want, or God forbid, I'm in a vegetative or comatose state with no chance of recovery. I'm making the decision for my proxy, for my family, what that decision is. I'm basically through my living will telling them, don't keep me alive with artificial means if I'm in that vegetative or comatose state. And hopefully it'll cut down on family fighting because they know what my wishes are. So if person's wishes are that if they're in a vegetative or comatose state with no chance of recovery, that they don't want any life-saving measures, it's important to talk with your healthcare proxy as to what your end of life wishes are and to have that living will as evidence to the proxy and to the doctors as to those are your wishes. And I see it again as taking control. I've made the decision. My proxy should not have that guilt as to the decision that they're making because I've already made it. I've made it for them. And with all estate planning, I see it as a way to take control, right? I'm appointing someone to make medical decisions for me if I'm unable to do so. The kids don't, or spouses or family or friends don't have to fight about it because I've made that decision. If I'm in an end of life position and I can't make those decisions, right? I'm in a vegetative or comatose state. I've made that decision for my family and friends for them to just follow. So I've taken control as to what end of life is going to look like. And then moving from the medical decision-making to the financial decision-making, a power of attorney. A power of attorney is a document that says if I'm unable to handle my financial affairs, I'm appointing an agent to do so for me, to handle bill paying, taxes, real estate, buying a house, selling a house, purchasing a co-op, selling a co-op, signing tax returns, doing Medicaid planning, making gifts, whatever it is, you're appointing somebody to make financial decisions for you if you're unable to do so. So the power of attorney healthcare proxy are documents in estate planning known as advanced directives because you're signing them in advance of becoming incapacitated. None of us plan to become incapacitated. None of us plan to have diminished capacity or capacity, the inability to handle financial or medical decisions. But if there should come a time where we get to that point where we lack capacity, we've appointed somebody to make medical and financial decisions for us. And I'll have clients who say, Sarah, I'm going to be fine. I don't want to sign a power of attorney. But I always say, well, what happens if you should become incapacitated? I won't. So I think there are just certain things we can't control. And again, I like having a power of attorney and a healthcare proxy. None of us wants to become incapacitated. They're like insurance policies, right? None of us wants to have a fire in our house or in our apartment, but God forbid there is, we want insurance to be able to handle the claim. So it's like insurance. If there should come a time where I lose capacity and can't make medical or financial decisions, I have my insurance policy of the power of attorney and healthcare proxy because I'm designating someone to make or someone's to make medical and or financial decisions for me. And what happens if I become incapacitated and don't have a power of attorney? It becomes a court proceeding. So someone would have to petition the court right here, Westchester County, the Supreme Court, the guardianship part, under the Mental Hygiene Law, Article 81, seeking to be appointed my guardian of the person and property to make medical and financial decisions for me. So now it's a court proceeding with attorneys, much more, just cost-wise, much more expensive and no longer private, right? Where if a person just had a power of attorney and healthcare proxy, for the most part, we can obviate the need for doing a guardianship. Or sometimes we have to do a guardianship anyway. Maybe the power of attorney was executed wrong or is insufficient to meet those person's needs. But again, I think part of control and adulting is having these advanced directives, having the power of attorney and healthcare proxy. And then upon my passing, it's important to have a will. Why? Because I then have control. I can designate who's going to be the beneficiaries who are going to receive my assets upon my death. I also get to be, choose under a will who's going to be the executor, who's going to carry out my wishes, who's going to be in charge of administering the estate. So when I have a will, I can decide who are my beneficiaries, who are going to inherit, and who is going to be in charge, be the fiduciary in charge of handling my estate. I thought I had a slide here. I apologize. I don't. What happens if someone passes without a will? We do something called an estate administration, where the court looks to see where someone seeks to be the administrator of the estate, akin to an executor, but then they can't just decide who's going to receive the funds. Your distributees do, being your closest blood relatives and a spouse if you have a spouse. So in New York State, if you die without a will, known as dying intestate, and you have a spouse and children or child, the spouse gets the first $50,000, and then the spouse gets 50%, and your children divide up the other 50%. If you die with no spouse and children, your children, however many they are, share what's there. So if you have 3 kids, they each get a third. If you die with no spouse and no children, the statute then looks to see if you have parents. If the parents are predeceased, they look to see if you have siblings. If you have no siblings, they look to first cousins on the maternal and paternal side, or if the first cousins are predeceased, children of first cousins. So again, it becomes a greater family tree to determine who should be what are called the distributees and then receive the funds from your estate. So again, to have control, to designate who you want to be the beneficiaries, I recommend doing a will. A revocable trust. I get calls all the time. Sarah, we need a trust. And the first thing I'll ask is, why? Right? Because we want to know what a person is looking for, why they want a trust. Do they want a revocable trust? to avoid probate and ease of management, a Medicaid asset trust, asset protection trust to start for Medicaid planning purposes. Many people use revocable trusts to avoid probate, meaning if the assets are all titled to the trust, upon my death, we won't have to probate my will, have my will admitted to probate, because the assets are all owned by the trust, so can be distributed by the trustee of the trust after paying expenses to the beneficiaries named in the trust. So we don't have the same waiting period as we do when there's a will and waiting for the will to be admitted to probate. It's also privacy. When a will is admitted to probate, a surrogate's court file is opened and a will is admitted to probate, anybody can go to the surrogate's court and look at a filing. With a revocable trust, there's much more privacy because it's not a public record, and then also that ease of management. But assets titled to a revocable trust do not afford any Medicaid planning protections. Assets in a revocable trust are still mine for Medicaid purposes, and therefore can make me, the assets are still owned by me. So those have to file, if I'm not eligible, there's no Medicaid protection in terms of assets in a revocable trust, other than to avoid probate. And then I wanted to talk about Medicaid trusts just for a second. In terms of assets titled to a Medicaid trust, once they're in there for 5 years, the assets titled to the trust are fully protected when a person is applying for Medicaid for nursing home care. Because for Medicaid for nursing home care, there's a 5-year look back to see if I've transferred any assets. For Medicaid home care, there right now is no look back period. I can take all my non-retirement assets today, January 13th, transfer them into a Medicaid asset protection trust, and February 1st, be eligible for Medicaid and for Medicaid to pay for my home care services. So there's no transfer penalty for Medicaid for home care. Unlike for Medicaid for nursing home, there's that 5-year look back. I'm going to take a minute. Does anyone have any questions regarding estate planning?
Let me just ask, just in case anybody else is wondering, they said they were going to be putting a look back in for community Medicaid. Can you speak to that?
Sure. So in the February 2020 New York State budget under Governor Cuomo, there was a proposal that passed to start a 2.5-year look back for Medicaid to cover home care services, and it was going to start in October of 2020. Almost 5 years ago now, what happened in March of 2020, we had the COVID pandemic. So during COVID, there was a public health emergency, so no changes of the Medicaid program were able to go into effect that would adversely affect individuals. So the public health emergency continued on, I think, till about 2023 or so. So we couldn't have the implementation of the 2.5-year look back for home care. Now there's still talk of possibly a look back for home care services. However, CMS, which is the Center for Medicaid and Medicare Services, which is the federal agency that oversees the state Medicaid programs, I believe has not yet given the authorization for New York State to impose the 2.5-year look back. So as of now, to my knowledge, a 2.5-year look back is still not going into effect. 2026 is also going to be a gubernatorial election. I'm not sure what Governor Hochul is going to do in an election year if she's going to impose a look back period for home care services. As of now, there is no look back for home care Medicaid.
There's a question in the chat, and it says, is it necessary to sign a HIPAA form if you have a healthcare proxy?
So we like to do both. Again, we're very conservative and suspenders and a belt. Just with a HIPAA form, it makes it easier because the doctors, the medical providers can keep that form on file in their digital records to be able to make it easier to be able to access records. So we like to have both. It's not required, but we like to do both just in terms of our practice and how we've seen how things have worked. I'd like to turn our attention. Any other questions regarding estate planning? So I'd like to turn a quick attention to long-term care planning because we are talking about protecting our assets in addition to our identity. And we've talked about this before, with the Yonkers North, how expensive care is, be it at home, in an assisted living, in a nursing home. And I'm happen to be a big believer in NORCs. When I started practicing law, I was a legal aid attorney or legal services attorney in the city. In Manhattan, New York City itself, NORCs are all over the place. And the services provided by NORCs are really pretty incredible. And the resources NORCs can provide are really pretty incredible. But when it comes to care gets expensive. And how do many people pay for home care services? Either long-term care insurance, if they were able to purchase it, private pay, self-funding, having family help, or looking to Medicaid to pay for care. And again, and I love this chart. I think it brings it home and I use it all the time. Nursing homes in the county cost close to about $200,000 a year now. Home care can cost $70,000 to $90,000 a year. So cost of care is cost prohibitive for many, many individuals, which is why they look to Medicaid to pay for care, be it at home with home care or in a nursing home for Medicaid to cover nursing home care. Again, if a person has long-term care insurance, they always have to activate the policy and use that policy first, or else many people do look to Medicaid to pay for care. So the Medicaid numbers in terms of income and resources increase each year. We don't have the new Medicaid numbers yet. They usually come out in February. So I'm still using the 2024 numbers here. So the Medicaid income limit for an individual is $1,732. However, as we know, if a person is in a nursing home, even if their income is $3,000 a month, they could still be eligible for Medicaid, but all of their income gets paid to the facility. If a person is on Medicaid for home care, if their income is $3,732, they're $2,000 over the Medicaid limit. They're not precluded then from being eligible for Medicaid to pay for home care. That $2,000 overage can either be paid to Medicaid as part of what's called a surplus income program, or to protect that $2,000 a month and be able to use it towards your expenses, you can be enrolled in something called a pooled income trust. These are trusts run by various nonprofits throughout the state. Many have heard of NYSARC or CDR or KTS. There are about 13 of them in the state where you can enroll with their trust, send them your surplus income each month. So if I have $2,000 over, I mail them a check each month, or I do auto withdrawal of $2,000. Each trust takes a user fee, and then I send bills, usually about $100 or $200, depending on how much is deposited in. I then send them bills to the trust. My monthly rent, my Con Ed, my Verizon, my other monthly expenses, and from the money I deposited in, they can pay those bills. So other than that monthly user fee, I'm not losing that overage, that $2,000. So again, it's very important if a person needs Medicaid for home care and they have more than that 1732, as long as they meet the resource criteria, which we'll talk about in a second, it should not preclude them from being eligible for Medicaid. They should they should still apply for Medicaid, right? And then use the surplus income program or deposit the surplus income, excuse me, into a pool trust. My apologies. For resources for a single individual, the resource limit for 2024, and it'll probably go up a little bit for 2025, was about $31,000 a month. Sorry, $31,000 in non-retirement monies. So if I have a 401k, an IRA, a 403b that has $150,000 in it, as long as I'm taking the required distribution, that retirement asset is protected for Medicaid purposes. It's exempt as a countable resource for Medicaid purposes. If I live in my home is also a not a countable resource in terms of Medicaid eligibility. So my bank account, my bonds, my stocks, my cash, that all counts towards the $31,175 resource limit for Medicaid purposes. Does anyone have any questions so far on Medicaid and the income and resources? So I'm going to talk a little bit about long-term care insurance. And again, it's an insurance policy to help pay for long-term care, either at home, some cover assisted living, or in a nursing home to be able to pay for that care. Again, people have to buy the insurance when they're healthy, right? If you buy when you already need care, most carriers will, I don't sell long-term care insurance, will reject you because you're not a good bet. Many people, if they were teachers, firefighters, police officers, postal workers, who were union members, many times were able to purchase long-term care insurance through their union. But again, long-term care insurance can be expensive in terms of the annual premium. So here's our irrevocable trust as to why many people forego purchasing long-term care insurance and do Medicaid planning as well. Any questions regarding estate planning and Medicaid planning before we turn to the second half of the program about scams? So we're seeing more and more, as I talked about in the introduction, scams targeting everybody. I don't think any person I know hasn't received a phone call, a letter, an email, anything, saying that you owe money, you owe taxes, you won the lottery, your children or grandchildren are in prison in Mexico. Whatever it is, scams are very prevalent. Identity theft is incredibly prevalent. How do we educate ourselves to protect ourselves against scams and against identity theft? And again, individuals with diminished capacity are much more vulnerable to scams because they don't always understand that they're being scammed. They think someone has become friendly to them and is helping them. I saw a lot during COVID where the neighbor, someone they met casually in the supermarket ends up moving in with mom or dad because they said, oh, I'm going to help, and then never moved out. Or someone says, oh, I'll help you with your bills and I'll take you to the bank. And all of a sudden I'm withdrawing money for myself as well as for this individual. Or even if it's just, I won the lottery and then someone's going to come to my house and help me fill out all my forms. I'm lonely. I become more vulnerable to these things. Or someone calls and says they're calling from a credit card company and there's some fraudulent charges. Can I give them my credit card number? I've had this and I'm like, well, if you called me, why don't you tell me what number you have on file? There's so many different, ways a person can be scammed at this point. So it's very, very important to really be aware and really know who you're giving your information to. Some of the common scams are the sweepstakes, right? I won the lottery, but I just have to pay the taxes on my income. Grandparent scams, the IRS scams, I owe money and I must pay it now or else they're going to come and arrest me. And then I want to talk a little bit about internet safety. So what is the sweepstakes scam? Well, there was a lotto ad a bunch of years ago. You need to be in it to win it. Like you need to buy a ticket. Nobody wins the Mega Millions without having entered the Mega Millions or any other lottery. Also, when you win the lottery, when you get the letter, and I don't know if anyone's ever received a letter stating they've won the Mega Millions, and as long as they pay their $500,000 for the taxes, they're not only going to win their $8 million, they're going to get a Mercedes-Benz as well. Beautiful, really great letters, and you always have to write the check to like John Smith. You can't win the lottery without having purchased a ticket. Also, if you do win the lottery, you don't have to give them money, the lottery money, to pay the taxes due and owing before you receive your proceeds. Trust me, all the taxes will be taken out. You don't pay the taxes before you receive the funds. And if you didn't buy a lottery ticket, you didn't win the lottery. But these scams are incredibly, incredibly prevalent. And then once you get the letter stating you won the Mega Millions, what happens then is a representative continues to call you and hound you to tell you you need to write the check for the taxes in order to receive your winnings. And scammers can become incredibly aggressive. Don't give them money. Don't write checks. Don't send wire transfers. And I like the bottom one, don't rely on caller ID. Anybody can change their caller ID to say whatever it is they want it to say. Don't trust they're calling from the New York State Lottery, even if they say they're calling from the New York State Lottery and the caller ID says New York State Lottery, because New York State Lottery doesn't call you. They don't know who purchased the ticket at the supermarket or at the drugstore. They're not recalling you. And how did they get your cell phone number or your home phone number? And talking about your phones, and you've probably heard this from me or many others, if you don't recognize the number, don't pick up the phone. If it's the doctor's office, they'll leave a message confirming your appointment. If you don't recognize the number, don't pick up the phone. Because once you pick up the phone, they're like phone banks. And again, I can't explain all of this, and I can only explain it in very basic terms, where they try to find live numbers. And once you pick up the phone, you're a live number, and people will just now keep calling you. If you don't recognize the number, don't pick up the phone. And if you think you can out scam the scammer, you can't. They're much smarter than we are, because if I'm talking to a scammer, I'm not just talking to one person. I'm talking to 3, 4, 8, 10 people who are all part of trying to scam me, and they're much smarter than I am. There was just an article a couple of weeks ago, I think it was in the Wall Street Journal and then in the New York Times, about what's called pig butchering and the big scam, like warehouses in other countries where people are calling us regularly to hook us in to send money, to send checks, to send our life savings. And we really need to be very, very careful. So if you didn't buy a ticket, you didn't win it, and you don't pay the taxes before, in order to receive your winnings. Grandparent scams, right? Grandma, it's me. Grandpa, it's me. I'm in jail. I'm in the hospital. I need money. Don't tell my parents. They're not calling you. The grandkids or the kids or the great grandkids or the friends, they're not calling you to wire money to get them out of the hospital, out of prison, out of another country. Hang up the phone and call that person's parent or spouse or someone else to see what's going on. If you don't recognize the number in the first place, don't even pick up the phone. Okay? Don't do it. These are all just scams. And don't send any money before speaking to other family members or friends. Most people don't call their grandparent if they've been arrested, right? My kids are not calling my father or my father-in-law if they do something stupid, right? They're going to call one of their parents or their sibling, right? Be very aware of grandkids calling you. So, and this you probably have heard multiple times, the IRS doesn't call you. And for years, and it only stopped recently, when my husband or I would get home from work, there'd be a message on the voicemail, the answering machine. It's some office calling to arrest us because we didn't do something. I still have no idea who this office is that's coming to arrest us, but thank God I still haven't been arrested, right? The IRS does not call you. The IRS is very good at sending us letters. People also can fake the IRS caller ID. They are not calling you. And you don't pay the IRS by credit card. You don't pay the IRS by wire transfer. You don't pay the IRS using gift cards. If there's an issue, you call the IRS phone number, right? The one number that you find online, or you speak to your accountant, or you go to your local library who has tremendous resources to help you to see if something is legitimate. Just because someone says they're from the IRS or from anywhere else, it doesn't mean they are so. And I talked about a credit card before, but a couple of years ago, Christmas time, I got a call from the credit card company wanting to confirm some charges. So I said, okay, so what credit card? And I said, what number? They're like, oh, no, you need to tell us the credit card number. And I had this whole fight with them and then I hung up the phone, but I knew it was that they didn't need, if they're calling me, they don't need me to give them my credit card number, right? If the credit card says that they're calling, hang up and then call the number on the back of your credit card and say, we just had an inquiry. Don't just believe that someone from the credit card company is calling you. So we're all online today. So you're all very savvy seniors who know how to access the internet. If you know how to access Zoom, I'm assuming many of you do online shopping and online banking and bill pay. Make sure you use very strong passwords. And for every account, use a different password. And yes, it's very difficult because you have to write the passwords down somewhere, or we forget passwords and we have to keep changing passwords. Don't make your passwords obvious, and keep a journal somewhere of the passwords that's not on your computer. Use only secure sites, right? The HTTPS. Don't go on to random sites. Use privacy settings. Don't give out personal information on a pop-up. Disable all your pop-ups. Don't always trust those emails. Check the email address. There's something called spoofing. You and I are emailing. You and I are talking. We met. You wanted to do a consultation. You're going to do your estate planning. We're talking about fees. And I can be what's called spoofed. And someone can email you with a link to wire me funds, but you're not wiring me funds. You're wiring funds to some strange site. But you could be doing this with a contractor, right? You need to be very careful of who you're sending money to, who you are corresponding with. And I know I sound like doom and gloom, but I actually think these are very basic things that we can all do to protect ourselves. What's another thing? And I'll tell you, every 6 weeks, my husband, and still it's been going on for years, gets a letter from Home Depot that he has to finish his application to take out a credit card. What have we done? I'd say 6 years ago now, we've frozen our credit. My husband's credit's frozen, my credit's frozen, and over the years, we've frozen all of our kids' credit. Why? Because if your credit is frozen, you can't take out a credit card. Nobody else can take out a credit card because the three big credit agencies won't release your credit to the credit card company. If you're not taking out a mortgage and you're not applying for a credit card in that moment, freeze all your credit, right? There's Equifax, Transmedia, and one other one. You can get a free credit report once a year from each of them, and you can freeze your credit. But you included can't take a credit card out. But again, it's another way to protect you so someone doesn't take out a credit card in your name. Any questions on that so far? But again, it's like estate planning. It's a way that we can take control. During COVID, I got a letter in the mail from the New York, I don't remember if it was New York State or federal. I think it was New York State unemployment office that because I supposedly put in an application for unemployment. I called my partner and I'm like, Anthony, did you fire me? Because I don't recall being fired. He's like, no. So I Googled New York State, and the first thing that comes up is Department of Labor fraud. Be very careful. So people were just sort of finding Social Security numbers, applying for unemployment at the beginning of COVID. So these are very important things to just do. Go through your mail. Make sure, right, that you're going through the mail. If there's something strange about it, like, oh, wait, hold on, my computer froze, so I may have missed that part. How do I go about freezing credit? Is it a free service? So yes, so you can freeze your credit with the three main credit agencies. If you Google, how do I freeze my credit? It is free, and the three credit agencies will come up, and you follow all the prompts on their websites to freeze your credit. And I wouldn't be surprised if the library couldn't assist with that as well, though I won't speak for the library system. But again, it's important to be able to go online to freeze your credit because it's just another way to protect ourselves. And here, shred everything. In Westchester County, we have great services here in the county. I think once, twice, even 3 times a year, they have Shred Day, where you can go and bring all your stuff to be shredded. They even have like an electronics disposal day where you can bring your hard drives and get rid of a hard drive from an old computer. Shred, shred, shred. Shred everything. Ensure that when I pay my bills, if I don't pay them online, through the bank, I actually bring the envelopes to the post office. I don't put mail in mailboxes anymore. I recommend if you're getting ongoing payments, ongoing income, have those direct deposited. Try to do as much online banking in terms of bill pay, so you're not sending as many checks in the mail or as many bills as you can put on a credit card, so you're paying fewer bills each month. Because we do know there are issues in terms of the mail fraud and checks. There's no need to carry your social security card with you ever. Keep it in your file. There's no need to have it in your wallet. What do you need it for? And God forbid your wallet is stolen, your social security card is with that. Don't use the same password on everything. Everything should have all accounts. Everything. I also, for my banking, I do what's called two-factor verification. So if I'm on my computer and I'm trying to log on to my bank account, they'll then send me a text to confirm that it's me logging on to the account. So it's very important to always take these extra steps. And if you're using a public computer, don't access your private information. Don't go onto your bank account and do online banking from a public computer. And again, don't give out your information to people you might not know who they are. It's incredibly important to be very vigilant in protecting ourselves, our identities, our assets from scammers and from any kind of identity theft. So these are just a number of ways to be able to do so. What are some resources here? The New York State, the Attorney General's office has an office in Westchester. Your local bank, the local police office, the DA's office has an elder abuse division. Even at the banks, I love this. When I go to the bank and I go to the teller, they have like little cards, like, are you being scammed? These are scams, right? CVS, if I go into CVS or any drugstore and I'm buying too many gift cards, the teller, they're supposed to help me. The people at the checkout counter, they're supposed to like check with me as to why I'm buying all these gift cards because, right, we don't pay bills using gift cards. Other resources are, again, talking about Adult Protective Services, the Financial Protection Bureau, Domestic Violence Hotline, Center on Elder Abuse. These are just the fraud hotline, different ways to different resources in case we believe we may be a victim of a scam. So what are some other steps that we can take? Know where all your assets are, right? Have a list of them somewhere that you know where it is. Know where your legal papers are. Where is your will, your power of attorney, your healthcare proxy? Keep everything updated. Have updated folders. Have an agent that you've appointed under your power of attorney know where all these important documents are. That way, God forbid, if you should become incapacitated or pass, no one's running around like a chicken without a head. People know where, Sarah's important documents, they're in the office in the top drawer. So someone I trust knows where things are. Make sure if I have an insurance policy, like I pay the premiums every year, right? Make sure we have our finances in order. It was very big in the 90s, right? Anytime you opened a bank account, you got a free toaster, a television, or whatnot. You don't need 15 accounts anymore, right? Of non-retirement, checking accounts. Try to start consolidating things to make things easier. Make a list of who your attorney is, your doctor, your accountant, your financial advisor, your social worker. So just it's all in one place to help you keep organized. I know that was a lot of information all at once, but these programs are really for, sort of the tip of the iceberg to really start us thinking about the importance of estate planning, the importance of protecting our assets from the cost of long-term care, protecting our assets from fraud, abuse, and identity theft. So I hope this presentation was helpful. Again, my name's Sara Meyers. I'm an attorney with the law firm of Anea, Scanlon, and Siriano here in White Plains. I very much value our relationship with the Yonkers NORC, with WJCS, with the Yonkers Library System. And I hope this presentation was helpful in terms of just getting it out there. My favorite thing is when we foil a scammer. My favorite thing is someone was able to live out their very long life at home with care, right? Those are great. But in order to be able to do things like that is we need to do the planning and take control and get that planning done.
Thank you so much, Sarah. If anybody wants to unmute, feel free.
Hello, this is Shar. I would like to know what is the difference between a a Medicaid protection trust and an irrevocable trust and a revocable trust? Is there a difference between
Okay, so a Medicaid Asset Protection Trust and an irrevocable trust are usually the same trust, because once I put assets fund that trust with assets, I can't take them back. The trust is irrevocable. And after 5 years, the assets in the trust are protected for Medicaid purposes if I should need nursing home care. A revocable trust, the assets in the trust are still mine. I have full and complete control over those assets. So the assets in a revocable trust are not afforded the protections for Medicaid purposes as a Medicaid trust are. So if I have $100,000 in my Medicaid Asset Protection Trust that I funded this month, I apply for Medicaid to pay for home care in February. The $100,000 that's not now titled to my irrevocable trust or my Medicaid trust is not available. It's not mine for Medicaid purposes to see if I'm financially eligible. If my $100,000 is in my revocable trust, that money is still mine. I still have full and complete control of that $100,000. So that having that $100,000 makes me ineligible for Medicaid because I'm above the Medicaid resource limit of $31,000. Can EE bonds be placed in an irrevocable trust? And does the trust pay the taxes on matured bonds? I don't know if you can change, because changing the ownership of a bond can be a taxable event. You would have to check with your financial advisor or the bank. Bonds are very different than brokerage accounts or bank accounts. So it depends on if you're able to transfer the ownership into your trust. And again, you'd have to check with I would go to the bank to check.